audiobooks. The Chapters Podcast is a listener-supported service of Ancient Faith Radio. For Ancient Faith, this is Tim Wenger.
Christ is in our midst. He is and ever shall be. You're listening to Ancient Faith Radio, timeless Christianity 24 hours a day.
Idleness, apathy, restlessness, procrastination. These are symptoms of what early Christians called despondency, a spiritual sickness rooted in a lack of care or effort. A condition as old as the ancients, despondency thrives in today's culture of leisure, anxiety, and digital distraction. Time in Despondency is a penetrating synthesis of ancient theology, spiritual memoir, and self-help practicality. It envisions despondency as the extension of a broken relationship with the experience of time. Driven by the fear of death and the anxiety of living, despondency drives us to abandon the present moment, forsaking the only temporal realm in which we have true fellowship with Christ. The remedies offered by time-honored Christian thinkers for this predicament constitute not only an antidote to despondency, but also stepping stones back to the present moment. In regaining the sacredness of time, we re-encounter the resurrection of Christ in the dark and restless moments of our lives.
Despondency, as I understand it, is a flight from the present moment. And so we have to understand what the present moment actually is in light of Christ.
To find this book and many others like it, you can go to store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
This is Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich, a live listener call-in show where we share the stories of everyday Orthodox people as we get to know the members of the body of Christ. Join the conversation. We invite you to call in with questions at 1-855-AF-RADIO, 1-855-237-2346.
Welcome to Everyday Orthodox. It is October 25th, 2020, and we are live on Ancient Faith Radio. Welcome. Now, we are here again on a Sunday night to introduce you to another wonderful Everyday Orthodox person. We like to get together every Sunday night, actually, and meet another fascinating person. I think the Orthodox Church is just full of so many interesting people. We have people who've grown up on the other side of the world and immigrated here to the United States. We have people who grew up in immigrant families. We have people who grew up not Orthodox, doing something completely different, and then somehow found their way to Orthodoxy, which frankly is not an easy thing to do around here. So we have all sorts of interesting stories and things. And then every once in a while, of course, we talk to someone who's not even here in the United States, or maybe not even in Canada, maybe someone from over in Europe. So we just want to make sure that you get to know people across the jurisdictions, across all the regions. You know, our church is a big and vibrant and wonderful group of people. And I think it's so important for us to get to know the body of Christ and to step out of our little corner of the church and get to know some people everywhere, all around the place. So, you know, when you travel, go visit a church. You know, when you're in town, every once in a while, you know, maybe go visit a different kind of parish, somebody in a different jurisdiction. It's really neat, I think, for us to all really get to know each other. And speaking of which, you're welcome to join this conversation and really get to know our guests. You're welcome to call in at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Our chat room is open at ancientfaith.com/radio/live. We've got Bobby Maddox himself here producing the show tonight, taking your calls. And I am so excited to tell you about our guest. Actually, our guest is a veteran of Everyday Orthodox. She's been here before. My friend Summer Kennard is a beautiful writer. She's so brilliant. I love how she writes. She published the wonderful Ancient Faith book of Such is the Kingdom. And she actually came on last year and we talked about Of Such is the Kingdom And I guess I'll let Summer tell you a little bit about what that is. But that was from last year, and it's still, it's still selling well, and people love it. And it's so helpful because it's really a theology of disability in the church. It's like, how does your church embrace people with different kinds of disabilities, especially children, but adults as well? How are we encountering them? How are we inviting people into the church? It's very beautiful. And then since then, Summer has, she's traveling around, she's speaking about the book, she's doing these other things. But of course, naturally, with a little time on her hands, a person like Summer doesn't sit around. It's only been a year since the last book came out, and Summer has actually started her own small traditional press, a little publishing house called Park End Books. And we're going to hear about that. How does one start a press? Why does one start a press? What is the purpose of it? And their first book is already out there, and it's neat. It's really neat. So I'll let Summer tell you all about it, but it's very cool. And then meanwhile, also, I will say, Summer has been quarantining like the rest of us, and she actually had COVID and had a really interesting story with that. So we're going to cover all of those things. So I'm so excited. Again, you're welcome to call in 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. And Summer, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Alyssa. It's so good to be back and to hear your beautiful voice again.
It's good to hear you. My goodness. Summer and I really are like friends outside the show. So we miss each other. So it's nice. Now we're all quarantined. We don't get to go anywhere. So it is good to hear your voice, Summer. So tell me, how are you? Is everything, are you just super busy? I feel like it sounds like you're super busy.
Well, so I did have COVID in March, but I also got post-COVID syndrome, which pretty much wiped me out. I slept for, I think, most of 3 months. And then since then, I've been kind of climbing out of it and trying to get back into a normal level of activity. But what I can do is I can sit down and write sometimes, depending on, I had the virus attacked my neural system, my nervous system. So sometimes I can't write because I get a very bad headache, but I can read. And so I've been editing books and getting things done here, and just trying to find ways to live my life with my family and do homeschooling in a much lower energy way, since I have not had as much of it. I think I took it for granted how much I used to do. So yes, I'm busy, but I'm also definitely trying to rest.
This is kind of amazing, actually, Summer, because you have really done a lot this year, and you're doing it mostly with post-COVID syndrome. So that is actually doubly amazing. How is it? Do you know how you caught COVID? How the coronavirus came to you in the first place?
Yes. So we were. My sister works at a bank, and before the bank started quarantining and shutting down their interactions with the public or doing masks or anything like that, she caught it from work, and I was babysitting her children. So I caught it that way. And I actually, since I was not an essential worker like she was, at the time, they wouldn't even let me get tested, but she did get tested and she was positive, and we had the same symptoms. So we knew what I had. So since then, it's been interesting. Somebody at her work didn't even test positive. They just had the antibodies. So she had an asymptomatic worker working with her at some point. And we think that's probably how it came to us, because we were already trying to be very careful. My youngest son, Basil, is medically fragile. So we were really trying to keep the family away from danger events early on. But
now, did anyone else in the household get sick when you did? Were you able to protect all the kids?
No, we all got it because we had been babysitting. Yeah, the cousins.
Okay,
and
so
we,
he did.
Yeah, no hard
so he had
there.
it though, but so he
did.
No, but of course they didn't know. But so he's medically fragile. Was he? I vaguely recall that he had it. I don't think I realized everyone had it. Mm-hmm. He had it the worst, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. No, out of the kids, he had it the worst. But thank God it wasn't very bad. It was for him more like a very light flu. But the thing that was scary to me for him was 6 weeks later he had a relapse. But he got through that in just a few days. And really, it's so amazing with people like Basil. He's like a little angel. And I feel like, obviously we can't, I never want to say, the prayers always make everything better, because sometimes you still lose people when you do pray for them. But I feel like in his case, I just saw the immediate effect of his coming through that with healing. And once again, I don't think that if you die of COVID, it's because of lack of prayer, because a lot of people are dying of COVID. And it is a horrible disease, and I recommend against it. If you could avoid it, try not to get it.
It is an interesting thing, though, right? Because we feel the effects of the prayers. We credit the prayers when things go well. And of course, when things don't end that way, it's like, well, that was God's will. But those prayers had some effect. We just don't know what it was, I guess. But
yes.
When you say he's a little angel, like that's not just a regular mom saying that about her regular, like, oh, he's angelic. I think he's adorable. He's really like, so your kids are a little bit different, right? As are you, right? Just to give especially our listeners who didn't hear you last year and don't know about Of Such is the Kingdom, what is your sort of background that makes you the right person to be writing Of Such is the Kingdom?
Well, a couple of things. The first one is that I have 3 degrees in theology and I study patristics. And so I was trained as a historical theologian. So I was able to have the skill set to go in and look at the resources in the tradition and be able to bring them forward to apply them to disability. And the second thing, which is the thing I led off with in the book, is that I'm autistic and my whole family is autistic. So our experience at faith, it's applied. It's not from the outside. I don't have to guess what it's like to be autistic and have arthritis and have dyslexia and be Christian. I know what it's like. So I'm able to bring that experience of grace. And because of that, I think also being disabled, I was not afraid that God was going to not be with me just because I was sick. Thankfully, I wasn't sick unto death, but there was a night when I thought I might die when I had COVID, but I never thought that I was alone. And I was never afraid. And I never thought that God was away from me. I felt actually very close to God and very drawn into prayers through the whole experience. So,
and I think you're right that there is, in a way, certain advantage. Like you said, you're disabled. You have all of these things going on already, and God's been with you through them. So you know that He's not going to flee in sickness. He's been there through all the other stuff, right? Like He's there with autism. He's there with arthritis. He's there with all the stuff. So there is, in some ways, I think, an advantage if we are, I guess perhaps the way to say it is if we're prayerful through whatever early struggles we have, we can come to a place where we learn to trust that God is going to be there. And then when they keep piling on, you're kind of okay at a certain point because you're like, yeah, no, He's got me. So that is lovely. That's very good. So, okay. So I don't know if last time, if we talked about it, I do want to hear a little bit about your family and how you got married and all of these things. But I guess I want to make sure that we close up the COVID question too, because so you're still having some effects from COVID, even though you had it in March, like before Texas ever shut down, back in March, you had COVID. Do you still feel it today?
Oh, I mean, yeah. A lot of the symptoms have waned, thank goodness. And they've discovered some other treatments, like they discovered that Pepcid helps. And when you have neural damage, it helps to take omega-3s to help repair. There's things like that. But I still am exhausted. I cannot predict my energy from day to day. I get horrible migraines very, very often. But for the first 2.5, 3 months after getting COVID, I had a migraine constantly. So this is an improvement to only get it sometimes.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah, so it's nice. To me, I'm just like, oh, that's better. And the people are like, what? You have a migraine.
But I mean, that's a good attitude. Right, exactly. That's a good attitude because I know, knowing you, I know that there are plenty of days when you're not able to do anything because you're really just overwhelmed by it. And I remember for a long time, I mean, you were like 90 days out and you were still saying things like, I can go to the grocery store, but when I get back, I'm completely wiped out. I can't empty the groceries. I lay down and my day is over. And that's a big deal. It's an interesting thing because of course some people don't even have symptoms and then other people have these situations that just drag on for months and months. So God willing, it resolves for you soon. But I always think that that's an interesting thing to bring up because, our lives are also changed by coronavirus and COVID and yet, people don't always know a lot of people who've actually had it and what's going on. So I appreciate you.
I will say one thing about that. is, don't take an all or nothing approach. Sometimes people say, well, I don't agree with lockdowns. Well, that's fine, but masks are a different thing than lockdowns. It really does help your family sometimes to protect yourself. But this is the other thing, just about if you get an illness or if you have a disability, think of it as the litter on which you are being carried to Christ. And that's an image I stole straight out of St. Cyril. I did not come up with that. And he talks about in the Song of Solomon, the litter, and then the mattress and the meeting of the beloved. And he compares that to the litter on which they brought the man who was paralyzed to Christ. And that's what I like to think about. Whatever sort of struggle you go through, let it be the thing on which you're carried closer to Christ. And I think that's what we can do. Whatever other things, I won't get into anything controversial. Yeah.
Right. But no, that's a beautiful image too, isn't it? Just that, because there are so many, we have different struggles, right? And that's important with this struggle, but that's important with a lot of other struggles, to see it as the circumstance, the context in which you'll be saved, in which you'll be healed, in which you'll come closer. That's beautiful. See, you always say the most beautiful things, Summer. Now you guys see why I like her so much, right? Because it's just, but I think in part it's your education, but I think it's your nature too. I think you're very poetic and eloquent. And then you combine that with all of this education, obviously in theology, and also with, you just have a real zeal for it. And you have a very beautiful way, I think, of seeing different bits and pieces of theology in the scriptures. And so just so you know, I always really enjoy listening to you talk and reading your blog posts and all that sort of stuff. But, and I do want to say, before we move on to anything else, for those who have not read it yet, Of Such is the Kingdom, A Practical Theology of Disability, it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And it's a practical theology, but like emphasis on the practical. Like you as a lay person can pick this up, and it's going to help you, even if there's no one who's disabled in your immediate circle. When you go to church, you're going to have a whole different way of interacting with people. It helps people who are running Sunday schools and preschools and any kind of ministries in the church to be aware of these things is a tremendous blessing. And, making the church a better place, making the world a better place. But all right, so I'm posting a link to that from the Ancient Faith store. Now, Summer, we talked a bit about you growing up in Texas. And as I recall, there was a lot of like walking in the woods, exploring things on your own.
Yes. Yeah, I was eloping and had no idea I was. I didn't know I was an eloping autistic kid. I just had this magical experience of getting to explore so freely. And I always thought as a child, my mom was really, really melodramatic, because when I would come home, she would be terrified and not know where I had been. Now I understand, as a mother of an eloping autistic child, oh my goodness, how scary for her. But
so this is a part, like this is something that happens sometimes with people who have autism. What is that? You just leave? Oh, like, is it, why?
You just don't have a sense. Well, so it's not necessarily that you don't leave. It usually, like in my case and in my son's case, it's combined with apraxia, which is, a difficulty speaking. So I had difficulty speaking as a child, and for a long time I couldn't control my volume. And I still get like this. If you see me in person and it's a crowded room, I can't speak loud enough because that part of my brain turns off when it's too loud. It's really weird. Well, it's maybe not weird for me, but it's something I have to deal with. So I would go to my mom and I would say, Mom, I'm going outside to play. And I thought it was in a normal voice. And I really said it like this, Mom, I'm going outside to play. No. Had no idea. And so now I'm like, oh, okay, I see what that's like. I hear my little son do that sometimes. Mommy, Mama, no. And he thinks he's talking normal. Man. It's just a sensory difference. So it's that. And then also having zero fear, like no fear whatsoever. And part of that is good, because it was like, oh, you just, a lot of, everyone's different. But for me, and I know a lot of my fellow autistic Christians, we just kind of, God's just there, and that's just how it is. There's no sort of filter. You don't filter God out. So it's just sort of like, okay, well, this is just God's world. Let me just go explore it. Okay. Which, yeah.
I mean, it's very, very beautiful. Now, granted, I can see where it could get you in trouble sometimes. But as I recall, you got to know the woods really well. You met crazy neighbors. You had all kinds of adventures. And it's a beautiful thing. And thank God you came through it okay.
Well, it was a different time. Also, it was the 80s, and people still kind of looked out for kids. And there were a lot more people outside on their porches churches and things. So I would go up to old ladies and things and ask them to tell me stories or to let me teach me about their gardens, that kind of thing.
I love that. All right. So you're growing up there in outside of Houston. When did you meet your husband? How did you meet him?
Well, thankfully, I actually got a couple of scholarships to some really awesome schools, and I was going to go to one of those. But then I got this sense of dread and panic, and it was like, no, you got to go to this other school. So I went, even though they didn't pay me very much, and I was very poor, so I had to take out loans instead of having a full ride. I went to Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas, which is not far from you because you're there in
That's
Austin.
Right. That's
and that's where I met my husband on the first or second week of school. We are both part of the Alpha Phi Omega Pledge class, which is a service fraternity. So I met him that way.
Nice.
And we did
That's lovely.
public service things together. Yeah, it was really cool.
Now, is he still a very service oriented person, would you say?
Yes. He's an Eagle Scout, and he's he's a really good person. It's not hard to talk about him because he really is a virtuous man. And I'm just like, well, I don't want to embarrass him by talking about him too much, but he's the sort of person where he shows up and people are like, I want him on the parish council, that kind of guy. And he is on our parish council. He's just really lovely. He's got a wonderful servant heart. And he used to teach at Boy Scout camps, and he's taught Sunday school. And now usually he's like my assistant in the special needs Sunday school class whenever we have Sunday school, things like that.
I love that. I loved hearing, Summer came to our parish to talk to us about of Such is the Kingdom, because, in our parish, we do have several kids with autism, and we have different, all different kinds of kids with all different sorts of things going on, anxiety and different sorts of things, a lot of sensory issues. And so Summer came and talked to our Sunday school back in the days when you could go places on purpose and talk to each other in person. And it was all so lovely. And we were all it was all sensory stuff. So we're all putting our hands in the same sensory bins, which now would be totally fun, I guess. But it is really a neat thing. Tell me about your Sunday school classroom.
Oh, I just went. So yesterday, I finally, for the first time in 7 months, felt well enough to go to Vespers. But then I used all my energy for Vespers, and I slept through church this morning. So, don't admire me. But I was able to go to Vespers and confession, and it was really good to be back. And I checked on my Sunday school class, and it's beautiful. We're not doing Sunday school in person yet because our county is a hot spot still. And so wisely, the bishops have decided to wait. And thank God. I think that's for everyone's safety. But my classroom is so fun. You come in, and there's a bin right to the right with 2 bins, one with flowers and one with little pretend candles. And you take a flower for Theotokos and a candle for the little prayer box, and you take it across the room to the icons, and you put your flower there in a basket for Theotokos, and you put the candle in front of the icon of Jesus. And that's how you enter the room. And from there, we have right now, it's kind of funny. Sometimes you do something that's accidentally prophetic, and I seriously can't take credit for this, but I had set up my classroom in February. I was like, we're going to enter the wilderness. And I was like, that's weird, God. I had no idea it was coming. And I set up the room with a bunch of little beach tents. You know how there's those half tents? So it's actually was a social distance classroom without intentionally being.
Oh my gosh, how cool is that?
It's so weird. I look at it now. So those are in there because we haven't taken them out, and they may stay there now. I don't know.
Yeah.
And we have some green rugs laid out to be the little carpet, the little place where you go for the gospel lesson. And the kids can, once we say our prayers together, once everyone's in the room and standing by the icons because they've put their little candles, then we go from there to the green carpet. And we sequence the gospel using images. We tell the story. My husband tells a story. He's got that gift. Kids don't listen when I tell the gospel, but they totally listen when I arrange it in the room. So I use my gift. He uses his.
Perfect.
So he does a story, and the kids take turns putting up the pictures in sequence. And then we go through and we do some kind of sensory thing to act it out. a lot of times we sort of kind of do an impromptu skit of the actions. And then we go from there to our sensory table. I've got this gigantic sensory bin table, and it will always have something in it to go with the lesson. So I think I used sand most recently, like back at Epiphany time, Theophany time. And when we use, let's say Theophany.
You have all kinds of cool stuff though.
So many cool things.
We
have kinetic
dried
sand,
lavender and kinetic sand. Yeah, it's like always
water.
something different, and it's something that you can like touch and smell and feel, and that engages. I think it engages everyone, but it also engages people who have all sorts of different, different styles of learning, different difficulties learning. That you can bring everybody together in this like really physical way. I think it's so
a lot
cool.
of fun.
It's wonderful. It was very inspiring to us to hear about it, Summer, because it's really something that it's not like, oh, well, you can have a special classroom for kids with special needs, but you can do this in every classroom, and the kids are really into it. It's actually not for kids with special needs. It's just accessible. So it's hands-on, and we have a icon dress-up corner where you can dress up like one of the saints. We have Duplo Church, and we have a whole bunch of big foam blocks for building the church. And we have some kind of lesson that will go with the story. So like I'll have water in the bin and little floating candles for Theophany and talking about the light coming into the world and things like that. We have all sorts of cool stuff. And soon, but I think, what do I have on my calendar? We're going to start releasing things, I think in June, for our press that you mentioned. One of the goals is we have an imprint called Accessible Church School. And that is going to have accessible curricula, because there's two things. If you try to include people, but you don't use best practices, you're actually excluding them. And accessibility is best practices for including everyone. So this is how everybody learns best, not just kids with disabilities. But kids with disabilities don't really have a shot of learning if you don't do the best practices. So this is all based on a lot of interventions, but also it's definitely grounded in the church tradition. It's funny, sometimes if you get it, something that makes me laugh, and I think you probably see this too as a teacher, there's a moment in teaching where somebody thinks that what you said was obvious. And then you know that you won. I love that. That's right. They all knew it. You're like, okay, excellent. Good deal. Good deal. Yeah. That's so true. Well, and I think, it's just such a beautiful thing. Orthodoxy is a hands-on faith, right? Like that's how God communicates to us already. We come in and we're lighting our candles and we're smelling the incense, and he's using all of those senses. And then we go to Sunday school and we sit them down at desks and we tell them to be quiet and we talk. It's like, what happened to all those senses? What happened to all of the beauty of Orthodox wisdom there? And so I love that, because I feel like what you're doing, the work you've done for Sunday schools, and that you're apparently continuing to do there at Park End Books, that's so helpful in recapturing that and really reclaiming that, because that's really the essence of Orthodoxy. It's so important. It's not just a detail. It's not just like happenstance. That's a big part of it. So I think it's wonderful. But you have a blog as well, right? I want to make sure that people hear about the blog in case they're looking for more information on such topics. What is the blog address?
It's summerkinard.com. So SUMMERKINARD.com.
Excellent.
And I have some tabs up there where you can see some of my recent talks when we could still give talks. And
back when there were talks.
Special needs resources and things like that.
Perfect. And I'm going to put that on the Facebook page for Everyday Orthodox. It's facebook.com/Everyday Orthodox for anyone who's looking for it. And we have a link to Summer's new press. We've got a link to the book, and we'll have a link to the website, to her blog site, so that you guys can find Summer. But we're going to take a short break. And when we get back, we are going to talk about this new press that you're doing. I think it's so amazing. I didn't see it coming. You announced it, and I was like, whoa, really? I think that's so cool. It's really, really neat. So we're going to come back and talk about Park End Books, but we'll take a little break first.
Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich will be back in a moment. Give Elisa and her guest a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO.
Hi, this is Father Evan Armatas, priest at St. Spiridon Greek Orthodox Church in Loveland, Colorado, and the host of the Ancient Faith Radio Sunday night call-in show Orthodoxy Live. I am pleased to announce today the release of my first book for Ancient Faith Publishing, titled Toolkit for Spiritual Growth, a practical guide to prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. It seeks to provide a guide to the three basic and primary disciplines of Orthodox spirituality. Through these disciplines, Christ opened for us a path that frees us from the disordered way of life that has become normal for many, even though their hearts and minds tell them otherwise. Please join me in exploring the three-legged stool of Orthodox spiritual practice, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Books now available at store.ancientfaith.com. And the title, once again, is Toolkit for Spiritual Growth. I look forward to sharing it with you. God bless.
Giving the ancient faith a new voice. This is Ancient Faith Radio.
We're back with Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich. Do you have a question for Elisa and today's guest? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here again is Elisa.
And welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. We're here tonight with Summer Kennard, and we're having a great time actually talking about Summer. We're about to talk about Park End Books, and I noticed though real quickly that ad that we just played was for Father Evan's book, The Toolkit for Spiritual Growth. And we will be back next Sunday night after Everyday Orthodox. You'll hear Orthodoxy Live, and then Father Evan and I are going to be talking about the second section of that book. I think it's almsgiving, so I'm very excited about it. Just wanted to remind our listeners, November 1st. So if you don't have the book yet, get it so that you can catch up and join us. And of course, you can join us even if you don't have the book. It's still it makes sense even without the book. But okay, Summer. Now, how long ago I think the first time I heard about Park End Books is when you put out a call for submissions, and you were talking about a goth woman's devotional. And I saw it and I was like, that's so cool. And I was going to actually write something for it and I never did. I apologize. But I tried about 100 times and it didn't work. But what is a goth woman's devotional? What is that? First of all, some of our audience might not even know what goth is. I think a lot of us Gen Xers out there know exactly what you're talking about, but fill everybody else in.
Well, so I actually meant it in more than one way. And of course, there's this idea of goth being people who wear dark clothes and have high contrast. Their appearance is very, looks like something out of the Addams Family kind of thing, to give a kind of reference. And I wanted to include people who experience God that way, where they're very close and have their feelings on their sleeve about their mortality and the pain they've suffered. So I wanted to include them. But my primary thing, I said Gothic, and people took it to mean just goth. And I do have a goth writer, and I will be sharing more from an interview with her and another one of my writers sometime soon. I have to edit the video, but Gothic refers to a time period. Right. So it's about those, whenever the Great Schism happened, about 100 years before that, maybe 150, to about 200 years after that, right before the High Byzantium up until right before the Protestant Reformation, basically. There's this time period of flourishing. And some people call it the Dark Ages, but it was not. It's this time when you built all those great cathedrals in Europe, and you have these very heavy stones, but somehow they draw your eye up to heaven, and all these contrasts, So I wanted to delve into that contrast of the artwork and the time period, and also the women's faith, because this is a time period, and usually you study this in Catholicism because a lot of the works we have preserved came just after the schism. But you had this time period where you had women monastics doing a lot of writing on women's spirituality. And there are themes that come forward there. And it's not just the women, but I focused on the women in this book because this is a women's devotional. These themes are this contrast between suffering and joy and pain and sorrow and beauty and love and consolation. And the best way I can say it, I talked about it in the introduction to explain to people all of what I meant by that. But whenever I first had a child, I remember it was the first time I understood what all those virgins from 1,000 years ago were talking about when they talked about this suffering and joy. There's this women's spirituality that is not just childbirth. It's not just singleness or virginity. There's something we have in common that's particularly womanly. And I looked at that and I said, one of the things that you see with women throughout all the saints and in the Bible is we bear witness. And this is a mark of our freedom in Christ. So this devotional is a testimonial. It's a devotion in testimonies rather than being something that gives you morals to the story. People enter the scripture and tell you in story how it came through their lives. And it's amazing. They covered a lot of topics. It is called Darkness is as Light from the Psalm of Darkness is as Light to You, talking about how God's with us in everything. And we went through and I asked people to talk about the hard times. So our sort of tagline for this is a Christian women's devotional for persisting in hard places. But what it is it's women reaching sideways in the dark and holding your hand while you're finding God in your darkness and your hard time. And it's not just the big trauma things, but it deals with simple things like that women deal with, like even from being a know-it-all. I know.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never done that.
Monthly cycle issues and grumpiness, or trying to carry your screaming kid up to communion, going through caregiving with a spouse or with a parent, suffering domestic abuse or overcoming or surviving childhood abuse, of course, losing infants or babies, divorce, very painful things, some of these. But everything in here, and when the people wrote me, they said, well, what do you mean? And I told them, just go to the place that was hard, where you met God, and look for faith, hope, or love. That's what I told them to look for. And they brought it. It's 22 different women, writers, and I guess about 60% of them are Orthodox. Some of them you'll recognize, like Dr. Nicole Rokas, Bev Cook, and Phoebe Mikhail. She's in here. They've written a little bit in there, but some of them are new, but you will recognize them someday, like Alex Talent and Sarah Gingrich are in here. Oh. Beautiful devotional writers. So we have a lot of emerging writers, and we also have about 30% Catholic and then some Protestant writers as well. But I told them if they were Protestant, they had to love the saints and love the Virgin Mary. And they said, okay. And it's kind of funny because some of the people, it's not what it says on the label, Reformed tradition, but they still love the saints. So, because this is dedicated, it says, for our Holy Virgin Mary, blessed among us, because we're women and blessed are you among women. So that's
beautiful.
That's beautiful. Wonderful. It's so encouraging. It's 9 weeks long. I wanted to get it out there so people would have it through this difficult holiday season coming up, where a lot of people are suffering losses or illnesses or uncertainties. And it really is encouraging. And I keep on doing this thing where I put out books that deal with intimacies where they feel so close that a lot of people don't put the public reviews, but I've gotten a lot of good feedback. So hopefully some of that will be public.
Yeah, there aren't so many people going, I'm going through a terrible time in my life and everything is very bleak. But you gave me hope, so thank you, because they don't want to admit that they're in a bad spot right now. But
exactly.
No, that is very beautiful. And I do think that's such an interesting idea that really is very much what women's spirituality is. And I feel like, I'm in Texas and so are you, right? And there's all of this, women's devotionals are all over the place. Mm-hmm. And they're not about going to those deep places. And they're not about, when you lost your child or when, you got divorced or when you dealt with abuse in your original family or something. They tend to be about like just how happy we all are and how we're all going to do just fine. and how like maybe we're going to start our own businesses, and like we're pretty sure that God's really worried about whether or not we're going to like sell Arbonne or something, which I, not to mock it, but it's like it's interesting to me because I'll have friends who will be talking about their Bible studies, and I'm listening and I'm going, that doesn't sound like what we do in the Orthodox Church. I feel like what we do is a lot more about that really deep, like connecting in that moment. And as someone who's gone through a lot of those kind of places and been in dark places, I've buried a son and I've had a miscarriage, I've had a divorce, I have all these kids with all these problems and all this stuff going on. And it's really true that when you go to that dark place and you're struggling and then you turn to God, when he reaches out and has you, like it's sealed, right? Like that's when you really know there's a God. And we talked about that a little bit with you, that you were saying that already having dealt with disability, when you got to COVID, you already trusted in God. Like, can you talk about that in the sort of sense of like these meditations as well? That what is that?
I actually included, I decided since COVID is something that so many people are going through, I made a devotional on that. I made one entry in here. I didn't write most of these, but I did make one on this subject. And I talked about, to me, there's a story in the Bible of, I'm dyslexic, so I think it's John 6:5 and not John 5:6. I think it's 6:5. And it's the one where the man goes down into the water and the angel of the Lord troubles the water. And then the first person, the paralytic who's waiting there and the Lord comes by and says, do you want to be healed? And no one will put me in the water, etc. So I actually talked about that idea of God troubling the water and how I experienced with COVID. I thought about, I had just written this book a few months before, talking about, of Such is the Kingdom, talking about how we enter into Christ's suffering in baptism. And there's a way in which we're all still in that water that's soaked with the Holy Spirit, and we're learning to breathe with God. There's a way in which all of us, our suffering is not our suffering, it's part of Christ's suffering. So I had that sense. And somehow whenever I was laying there just struggling to breathe, I suddenly one day woke up and it was looking out. Maybe it was because my eyes were messed up because COVID attacks your eyes. There's a lot of symptoms. It's really messed up. I laugh now because it was so bad. It was so bad. It's funny to look back like, I can't believe how hard that was.
Well, and at this point, like we're all kind of used to the idea that COVID just does a million crazy things and you can't know why. But when it first came out, it was really like, are you serious? Like, what is this?
How weird was it? It's the weirdest illness I've ever had in my life. I mean, it was so strange and different. So anyway, I woke up one morning and I looked up and I had been praying this prayer and I felt people praying for me, and I looked up and it looked like I was looking up through water. And all of a sudden, I of course thought of that, God's going to trouble the waters. And I thought, your job right now is to be under that troubled water. Your job right now is to let God heal you and to experience the rest of Christ, the rest and recuperation, because that's not easy to do. And I actually, last time I talked to you in person, and tell a little backstory, I told you we were going to tea right before I went to talk at Holy Transfiguration. And I told you, Alyssa, there's something that's on my heart and I don't know what it is. And I told you, it's something about Jesus calling somebody daughter. Well, during COVID, I saw it. And this is what it was. I came to the point where I felt like everything fell away. And it wasn't just because I knew that my life or death were not in my hands, because that was obvious. There was a night when I thought I was going to die and I didn't, so thankfully. But I actually asked St. Nectarius, I was like, St. Nectarius, listen to my confession, because honestly, I don't know what to do here. I was just like, pray for me. And there was a night where I just stayed up all night making myself breathe with my singing abilities, my diaphragmatic breathing, because I couldn't breathe. And I was laying there and got through that moment. And then I came to see over the coming weeks as I was sleeping, and then I could read stories, and I read these epic stories like C.S. Lewis stuff and the Earthsea stuff and all sorts of big stories. And then one day I woke up and just the stories were gone. There was no enchantment to me. And I realized that I was just staring at, I couldn't see anything. And then I was like, God, I don't understand what I'm feeling. What am I feeling? And I suddenly, boom, I was in the story. about Saint Veronica, and I was spent, and I'd spent everything I had and hadn't got better. And all I could see was, I remembered Isaiah 6 and the seraphim and the hymn of the Lord filling the temple with glory, and the seraphim calling, holy, holy, holy. And suddenly I saw, almost like she was showing me how she saw the hem of Christ's garment. And I realized, this is all I have. All I have is him. And it was like reaching out and feeling spent. And that's when I understood, he's the one that she called daughter. She's the one that he called daughter, I mean.
Yes.
He said to her, she's the one, had spent everything, and she touched his hem. And whenever he looked for her, who touched me, and he said, your faith is daughter. He called her daughter. So there you go. That's my question.
There
it was
you
like,
go.
God,
Now we know.
Yeah.
It was already there. God was setting you up and getting you ready. And he's like, all right, you're going to need this. You're going to need this next month, Summer. You don't know it. But,
yeah, exactly.
You're going to need it real soon.
So it came through.
Oh, my goodness.
It's just
That's
that sort
beautiful.
of thing. And with the press, it'd been in the works for a while, and I'd had a blessing for a couple of years to start one, but I was learning how to do it. And I had gone in 2019 to the Independent Book Publishers Association Publishing University and learned how to become a publisher, and set up a lot of ideas. But what happened was, middle of the summer, we started looking around, and I was like, you know what? I can't do very much but sit down. So I talked to my husband, and I was like, I don't know whether I'm going to live or die. We don't know. And I guess that brush with mortality, I just sort of said, why don't we just go ahead and do this? So we made the decision to go ahead and start our press. So we filed our LLC. And as soon as the ink was dry on our corporation papers, we sent out our call for submission. So we started Park Inn Books on July 1st.
Wow. Yeah.
And
you're open for submissions in general, right? Like not just for specific devotionals and stuff. Like what kinds of books are you, what are you publishing? What are you aiming to do?
Okay. So our goal is to take Orthodox and Catholic voices, and we want to make a place for emerging voices in the marketplace, the mainstream market. We want to get Catholic and Orthodox books, and mostly Orthodox because that's our background, onto shelves in regular bookstores, not just in church bookstores, which is also wonderful, but our books are distributed everywhere. So we're trying to develop relationships with local bookstores. We're trying to bring up emerging authors and sort of talent spot, because there's a lot of people who didn't have a market for their books. And it's discouraging that unless you happen to write in a genre that will cross over into the mainstream market, a lot of people don't know about Orthodox writers, or Orthodox writers just leave their beautiful work sitting in a drawer because they don't have a place. The Christian Booksellers Association is only for evangelicals. They actively discourage what they call Catholic content.
Yeah. And so we write Catholic content is what I've learned. Yeah,
that is right. So we don't really have a place in that market. And we don't have very much place in the mainstream market as it is, not because we don't write well, but because we didn't have very many presses bringing it out. Now, Paraclete also distributes everywhere. Of course, Ancient Faith is sort of its own distributor, so it's also wonderful. But you can't just go to any website and find all the Ancient Faith books. Some of the websites don't have them because they're not with the same distribution channels. And that's all technical background stuff. But so it's we're just filling a niche. And this is all simpatico with Ancient Faith. I talked to John Maddox way before I did this. I was like, we want to do curricula, and we want to do more devotionals, and like get the niche fiction that maybe doesn't fit with Ancient Faith's model.
Right.
And so we talked, and he said, oh yeah, please go ahead. And that it wasn't a competition.
But thank God we're in I converted 20 years ago. There weren't any books in English, really, right? There were a few here and there. It was like Father Anthony Cunyaris and Father Tom Hopko, and bless them, and they wrote wonderful books, but it was really a fairly closed field. And now it's like exploding, and we need more than one press. Thank God.
Yes.
I mean, that's awesome. And I'm sure that, John Maddox and anybody else at Ancient Faith feels the same way, that thank God we have enough people writing now and enough people buying books and enough people interested that, our Orthodox community is blossoming. So glory be to God. But so you mentioned fiction and you mentioned curricula.
Let me tell you, I forgot to answer your question because, of course, everything's a story in my brain. I'm so sorry. It's just like, you asked a simple question. Let me tell you a whole story. Well, so first of all, we are not open for submissions right now. We are open again in March because I have 3 books to get out very soon. We're going to be putting out a book next month, and we postponed it because we realized it was too close to the election and we couldn't not cut through all the election noise. Everybody's talking about politics, and it was not fair to the novelist to try to promote a book at that time. So we bumped that to the spring. But we are putting out another book called Our Autistic Home sometime at the end of December. At the beginning of December, we are putting out a wonderful, beautiful book by a debut author called Catherine Bodega, and it's called With Two She Flew, and that's a middle grade novel. But something I would think that our listeners will especially love is 2 debut Orthodox authors, Alex Talent and Sarah Gingrich, who just debuted in Darkness is as Light. I sort of realized they have this gift for devotional writing. They are doing a book called Letters for Pilgrimage, Lenten Meditations for Teen Girls. So
no way.
Yes, it is so
I know Sarah, and
cool.
This is going to be good. It's going to be good. She has such a neat way of expressing herself. She does. Yeah. That's great.
They're both adventurers. They've both traveled, and they both have this sort of adventurous take. It's like, kind of like the Rangers, like not the hobbity hobbits, but the sort of adventurous ones are like the scrappy people in the Lord of the Rings. That's them. They're very, very fun women. And I think
awesome.
their writing is beautiful, and it's going to be beautifully illustrated with what do you call those? Lino cuts. So I am looking forward to putting this together, and that's coming out in February in time for Lent. So,
okay. Oh, excellent. All right. So I'm putting on the website here, Park End Books' site on the Facebook Everyday Orthodox page. But where can we get these books? Like, do you sell them on your website, or where do we get them? If you're distributing them everywhere, where do we look?
If you go to my website, Park End Books, you'll see a tab that says books, and we have Darkness is as Light up now, and I'll be adding With Two She Flew soon. And those are just press releases, but if you scroll down to the bottom, it has the links. We have our own shop on bookshop.org, which is an independent book selling site. And I'm actually going to be adding the, is it called Waystone Press? There's that group of Orthodox authors who've sort of formed a co-op. I'm going to add some of their books to our bookshop too. The advantage here is bookshop.org. You basically can make your own online bookshop and cut out the middleman. So you're the middleman in some ways, and you support the independent presses more, which is wonderful. You get a higher royalty rate for your authors and things like that. It's really nice.
Well, and I think people don't necessarily know that, right? Like Amazon is awesome, and you can access all the books there. But if you go and you buy things from different places, Amazon kind of gives the least amount of money back to the press and to the author. So it's like, that's fine, right? But you can still buy all the books, my books are at Ancient Faith or they're at Amazon, right? And it's like, well, you go there and you buy it at Ancient Faith, and you're supporting Ancient Faith maybe more robustly than if you do it at Amazon. But, nobody minds if you buy it at Amazon either. If, it's still a good thing. It's still a very good thing. So you're like, your stuff is at Amazon, you're at Barnes & Noble, you're at all the basic stuff. And you're also at a lot of really neat independent booksellers that I think people want to support, like Powell's and that's neat.
And that's, we're doing, right now we're a very small press. And so, or somebody on Twitter called us a tiny weird press, which I think that fits. That tiny weird press.
Honestly, I feel like for you, that's exactly what you wanted to hear. It was like, yes, it's a tiny weird press. That's me.
That's right.
That's awesome.
But we're also doing, we have in development right now several volumes of accessible church school curricula, and we're going to be putting out an Old Testament primer, which is largely written by Arlen. Oh, I'm bad at names. Is it Arlen Krantz? I know this person. She's wonderful. I love her work, and I'm dyslexic, so I move letters around.
No,
Probably
you know what?
it's
It's
Krantz
okay.
with a K. It's really fun to be an editor like this, but see, I have the writing in front of me, so I'm fine when I can see it. It's just that it moves around in my head. It's called a
It happens.
dyseidetic dyslexia. It's just where words move. They just
That's
do what they
wild.
want. They're
Really?
kind of they're in 3D. Yeah, I just think in 3D. I think spatially, and even words are spatial to me. So because of that, I will remember people very well, but sometimes their names are very strange to me. They just move. I'm like, I don't know, it ran away.
You know, that's interesting. I mean, and I think in a way it sounds entirely appropriate to find that you think so differently, because the way that you express yourself, it's very true and it's very authentic and it's very eloquent and beautiful, but it also is so different to me than so many other people. And like you say things, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's beautiful. You know, but it doesn't occur to me on my own. So excellent. That explains it. There you go. It's the 3D thinking. But,
Well,
okay,
speaking of 3D thinking, I want to tell you about Seven Holy Women, which just came out with Ancient Faith.
Oh,
because
yeah, that's right. You have one. You're one of the
Yes.
women, or you wrote
I'm
about one of the women.
Well, I'm not one of the holy women. I wrote about Saint Piama.
Yeah. Just to be clear, seven women wrote stories about seven holy women.
Seven women,
They're not
yes.
calling themselves holy. But so who did you write about and why?
I wrote about Saint Piama, and I think I did because she sort of reached out to me. Melinda Johnson came to us and said, I started writing this book. I wrote these 4 short stories that are immersive from the point of view second person. So you're experiencing it as the woman, as a saint, which is a really intimidating undertaking, by the way.
Yeah.
I think I venerated and prayed with the saint and did studies and things like this for several months before I got screwed up my courage to like write.
Yeah,
And
I
so
bet.
she had the first 4 short stories, and she said, I want you all to write this with me. And we were like, okay, this sounds great. And, you know, most of us know each other and we're friends, and we're all friends with Melinda. And it was a really cool experience to be able to step in and read these stories of women. They're all before the Great Schism. So these are every Christian woman should be able to relate to these women. No one has tagged them as just ours, you know. But it's an immersive experience where you get to follow the saints' examples by putting your faith into action. The stories, Melinda wrote the first 4, and then 3 of us wrote our own stories. I wrote about Saint Piama. Can I read you a tiny smidget from what I wrote?
Yes, but you have to be quick. But yes, please.
Very fast. Here we go. This is Saint Piama, and she lives by the river in my section, by the River Nile. So this is her walking down because she's heard the angel calling her by the water. You pause before you come to the steps. The mud under your feet holds the day's heat, and you can scarcely tell where your feet end and the warm mud begins. Clay from clay, I am only mortal, though God has breathed on me, you whisper. A great silence swallows your words and stills the night sounds of the river. Holy sings out in the falling mist before you, and the sound trembles through your head and chest and hands and toes, through the mud and the river and the linen, and you are seized with the white-hot terror of holiness. You are like clay when it is dipped in molten gold, and you feel your lips, even through the burning, move to answer, holy. Do not be afraid, Piama, the voice says. That was quick.
That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. Well, and we should say that, so the Ancient Faith does a women's retreat every year, and you and I have been at them, and it's always so fun. It's always good to see each other and everybody else. This year it'll be online, of course, but it'll still be good to see everybody on Zoom. And the theme is 7 holy women. So you're going to speak, right?
It's going to be fun. I'm going to make y'all sing. I'm just like a little bitty tiny snippet.
Oh my gosh,
I'm going
you're
to talk
regret
about
it. I'm so bad. But
No, you can't. I actually did something, and I practiced with several people that I was able to trick into going along with me. Not trick, but I've tested this. There's no way to do it wrong. I promise you, there's no way to do it wrong. And there's just talking about the prayer of the heart and about the angelic hymn that never ends. And Saint Piamo encountered an angel, and my patron saint is Archangel Michael. So I thought, this is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about prayer of the heart and about preparing to meet God, because that's what my section of the book is about too. not so much Piama's cool miracle of stopping a village from coming to attack her village, but with the way that she was ready to hear the word of God when it came to her. So I have this really cool thing that I've set up, and I hope y'all would join us. It's not too late to register. If you go to the Ancient Faith store site, you can register and you get a free book. So
that's right.
It'll be really wonderful.
That's right. It's at ancientfaith.com/events. And so you can sign up to come to the Ancient Faith Women's Conference or any of the other conferences that are upcoming. And again, usually they're in person, which is so beautiful. But the advantage of doing it online is also that, people who can't travel for one reason or another are suddenly able to attend. And I think, there's always a silver lining. So that's been very beautiful. But okay, so Summer, Park End Books, I just want to get one last plug in here. So the devotional's out. What is out next? Which one is it? It's going to be the one with Sarah with the one for teens.
The With Two She Flew comes out next month. 2 months in December. Okay. And that's an autistic Orthodox girl. And she finds refugees who her church is hidden, and the whole church works together to get them safely back to a monastery. So it's a really sweet story. It's very beautifully told, and a very shy author though. So, and then our next one in February, Letters for Pilgrimage, Lenten Meditations for Teen Girls, and that's by Sarah Gingrich and Alex Talent. They are 2 debut authors in Darkness is as Light, and I love their work, and I think it's going to be really encouraging for Orthodox teen girls.
This is excellent.
They're bringing a lot of beauty to it, and a lot of adventure, and a lot of realness and truth.
Amazing. Summer, thank you so much for coming on. I'm amazed at how much you've gotten done during your COVID-19 illness year. You are an inspiration to all of us. But thank you for coming on, and we'll have to have you on again in about 6 months to hear about 100 other things you've done. So thanks, Summer. And thank you to our audience for joining us. Come back next week. We'll meet another wonderful everyday Orthodox person. Good night.
To the Holy Spirit.
This is Orthodoxy Live with Father Evan Armatas, a live interactive call-in program where your questions about the Orthodox faith are addressed. Father Evan is the priest at St. Spiridon Greek Orthodox Church in Loveland, Colorado. Call in your question at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Here now is Father Evan.
Well, good evening and welcome to Orthodoxy Live, your live call-in show about the Orthodox faith, her teachings, and her traditions. I'm your host, Father Evan, and we're streaming to you live here on October 25th at Ancient Faith Radio. I'm glad you're with us. Hopefully our producer will notice we've got our lines closed off right now to you as listeners, but we're going to be opening up those lines if you've got questions so that you can call in. Showing up on my board that we don't have those lines open just yet, but once they do open up, we hope to hear from you at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-AF-RADIO. I have to tell you that this was an interesting week for me. Last week, as the show was rolling, I was starting to feel a bit ill. By the end of the show, not so great. I spent the week in bed and slowly recovering. I'd still say I'm far from 100%. But I wanted to make sure I was on air tonight. And again, just so our producers know, the lines still show as closed. And I'm not sure if people can see that. Yeah, I'm just seeing it on my end that the lines are closed. And Trudy, thanks for checking on that. But you might want to give it a double check. Again, they're just showing as closed out. The number, though, once those open up is 1-855-237-2346, 1-855-AF-RADIO. As I said, I wanted to make sure that I was on tonight because, oh, there they go. It looks like the lines just opened up if you want to call in. Because I'm hoping tonight to hear from two dear friends of mine, Bill and Patty Karamitis, who are up from Ecuador visiting the United States right now and seeing their children, and wanted to have a conversation with them. But as we get underway today, today being the 25th of October, you probably have been hearing about the terrible weather that we've had here in Colorado due to the fact that we've got these enormous forest fires raging on the west end of town. And thankfully, we started receiving a ton of snow. It began late last night. It's continued all through today, and we hope that that'll tamp down the fires. It's been so dry, so hot here in Colorado. But as I said, we've got probably 7-8 inches of snow on the Front Range, maybe a foot up in the mountains, and hopefully that continues and puts a big damper on these massive fires. Also today, at the parish of St. Spiridon's, we celebrated the ordination of a young seminarian, Gabriel. And I mention this to all of you because, in the midst of all that is going on, all the crazy news that we're facing, all of the troubling things we're seeing, our response as the church is to lift up a life of love and sacrifice. And Gabriel, the newly ordained Deacon Gabriel, is a recent example of that reality. Each of us in the church has an opportunity to turn from what the world offers and make our way towards the life of Christ. But to do that, we've got to go down the road of the cross, just as our Lord himself taught and he himself did. And so I was rather touched to see that event happen today. If you would like to, if you've never seen an ordination, if you'd like to see that, you can go to St. Spiridon and click on our YouTube channel or our live stream. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll find other videos there as well. But today's video from today's liturgy, you can also get to that through Ancient Faith. You'll find the ordination of Deacon Gabriel. Additionally, I just want to remind you, next week we will be having our second discussion about the book Toolkit for Spiritual Growth, a practical guide to prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, published by Ancient Faith. If you haven't yet picked up your copy, encourage you to do that now. After the show next week, we'll have a second hour in which we discuss the second part of the book, Almsgiving, with Elissa Bielatich, the host of Everyday Orthodox. If you missed the first episode of our book study, you can go back and listen to that here on Ancient Faith, but no need to have joined us for the first one. You can get the book this week and join us for that second discussion. All right, once again, the number to call is 1-855-237-2346, and we're going to go out to Ben. Ben, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here, Father Evan.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for being patient as we were getting that technical difficulty sorted out, but tell me where you're calling from.
I'm actually in San Antonio, Texas right now, but I live about an hour west of town in a tiny little town called Sabinal.
Sabinal?
Sabinal.
Sabinal. Wow. Well, welcome to the programs.
Really unlikely that you've ever heard of it.
No, I haven't. Where do you attend an Orthodox church down in Texas?
No, I don't. I'm not Orthodox. I've been looking into it and investigating it for probably close to 3 years, and listening to you for a couple of years, and just really want to thank you for what you do. It's been a huge, had a huge impact on my life, and
I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, I've learned a ton, and I'm an evangelical, I guess, technically. I don't really consider myself one, but that's where I attend, and my wife as well is evangelical, and but she's really supportive and comfortable with me learning more about Orthodoxy. And the more I learn, the more I love it. I attended one Orthodox church in San Antonio, Orthodox service, and it was just fantastic. But I'm continuing to learn through your broadcast.
Well, so Ben, you're a longtime listener and a first-time caller. Yes. I know that outside of San Antonio, there are a couple of monastic communities as well. Have you visited them?
No, I have not, and I didn't even know that there were. I'd like to look into that.
Yeah, you'll have to do yourself a favor and look up, Orthodox communities and monastic communities. There's a number of them in Texas, and hopefully you'll get an opportunity to attend one of them.
That would be great.
Yeah, one of my favorite monasteries is Holy Archangels in Candelia, Texas. but I don't know how far that is from you.
Yeah, I will definitely look into that, because that's something I'd like to. It's something I'm really curious about.
Well, I just did a quick Google, and so Spring Branch, Texas, and Washington, Texas. Those are two. I don't know how far those are from you.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Spring Branch, but I'm not even sure how far it is from me. But I'll look into it for sure.
Yeah, check it out. Well, welcome to the program. It's nice to have you on. Love to hear your question.
Sure. I just in a Twitter conversation that I was a part of a couple of weeks ago, I came across the term lay monasticism.
Oh, right.
Which is something I'd never heard of and didn't know existed. And I kind of dug around on the internet a little bit. I read one article by Abbot Tryphon, I believe. I apologize if I'm pronouncing. I don't do well with the pronunciations, but. But I couldn't find a lot. And my question is this: can a married man become a novice monastic in the Orthodox Church?
Well, there's a lot to say here. It's an interesting question that you're asking.
The reason I came up with the question is because I came across an article that described the different levels of monasticism. And it said that many monastics remain novices their entire lives out of humility. And I was wondering, well, if that's the entry level status, and you intend not to progress any further beyond that, could a married man do it?
Right. Yeah, the path of monasticism in the church in its full bloom, as you probably already know, encompasses celibacy and lifts up the model of St. John the Baptist, for example, our Lord and Savior, of course, and then in later church history, after the time of Christ, we can look at some of the great monastics like St. Anthony, St. Moses the Black, those who inhabited the Egyptian desert, up forward to people like St. Basil or St. Benedict, right? And the monastic life, as I said, usually encompasses life within a monastery, whether that be idiorhythmic or cenobitic, or one lives as a hermit. These are terms that, for purposes of our discussion aren't all that important, but different rhythms of community life, certain levels of separation from the world. So usually within a monastic community, usually with some oversight, and that oversight would place upon the monastic a rule of prayer, of charity, of fasting, and some sort of the konisa, like work, like tending a garden or the sheep, or taking care of the church, or groundskeeping, something like that. And so we would say traditionally that's the life of a monastic. It's one of renunciation of the world, of any familial attachments, spouse, children, parents, and one completely gives himself over to Christ and the church. That lifestyle, which is distinct in the church, is not meant to be looked at as something better, although St. Paul speaks about it to a degree as a better way of life, but rather it is a distinct call, a vocation in the church. On the other side of that, we could say there is the married life, the life of a family man. You yourself are married. I don't know if you have children, Ben.
Yes, I've got 3.
Oh, wonderful. So you have 3 children, so you're a father, you're a husband. I'm assuming you work and participate in, some sort of job to earn income and support your family,
yes.
Right?
Yes, yep.
Okay, so unfortunately, as church history developed, as people came to see these two lifestyles, unfortunately, often in the West, they became distinct, sort of like, well, there's the monastics and then there's the married people. And within Orthodoxy, that sort of hard line, that sort of wall of separation never really existed. Rather, the married within the church and the monastic within the church had relationship with one another. You know, the rhythm of the church placed monasteries and, let's say, local parishes within close proximity so that they could both benefit from the other. I'll give you a simple way of looking at this. My own church community of St. Spiridons visits often monasteries in Arizona and even in southern Colorado and New Mexico. And the faithful, you know, married and sometimes just single men or women or young adults or even children, often visit the monastery and then return to their lives in the world, okay? And that relationship is organic, it's natural, and both benefit. The monastery benefits from the reception of pilgrims and the relationships they form with them, and vice versa. I paint that picture for you, Ben, so that not only you but others can begin to sort of strip away this idea that, you know, monasteries are for monks and nuns and parishes are for everybody else. No, both places have an interconnection and a relationship. Some within the church, because they benefit so greatly with a relationship through the monastery and they feel a call, may form a closer relationship with the monasteries, okay? And those terms that you use, like a lay novice, you know, I wouldn't say that I'm overly familiar with that phrasing. I've often heard a lay monastic or a monastic in the world. And there's even within the Western Orthodox Rite the idea of a Benedictine oblate, which is someone who's taken on the rule of prayer and some of the rhythms of the monastic life, but remains in the world, remains married, you know, continues in their work, continues as a parent. So what I would recommend to you, Ben, is if this is a path that eventually God calls your heart towards, it's a path that wouldn't necessarily take you out of the world and into the monastery, but rather it would leave you in the world and place upon your life an added rhythm of what comes from the monastery. And there would be a connection between yourself and the monastery that would perhaps be rather strong. You know, you might visit often with a father in the monastery who takes you under their spiritual direction. But this is something that probably one doesn't reach till later in life, usually when their children are raised, usually when their relationship with their spouse is in a very positive, solid place, and the level of intimacy, physical intimacy, has ceased, you know, naturally so. You know, or perhaps because of a prayerful choice, you know, that this is no longer an element of the relationship you're wanting to share, and you mutually agree to that. So there's some things to think about, but what I would say to you is, yes, there can be a relationship between married people and monasteries. This relationship can be rather deep. It can, in some times, in some places, be formalized as a type of oblate, or, you know, let's put it in quotations, novice. And even married people, you know, I've met monastics whose wives wanted to go into the monastery, and the husband wanted to go, and they both left the world, as we would call it, and went into a monastery, mutually agreed to do so in peace. And they live as brothers and sisters now, not as a married couple. That's a path that some have followed. Yeah, for sure. And that's very common in the church.
Wow, that's amazing. I appreciate the answer, and like, you know, every new thing I learn about Orthodoxy just kind of opens up yet another door of learning for me, and it's incredible. It's amazing. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
You bet, Ben. Great to hear from you, and check in again down the road, okay?
Okay, I will.
Thanks for calling, Ben. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, I mentioned to you earlier, as Ben drops off, that'll open up a line for you at 1-855-237-2346, that I was expecting a call from my dear friend Panayota and her husband, Bill. Patty, are you there?
I am, Father Evan.
It's great to hear your voice. I'm doing a little bit better. I think you heard through the grapevine that I have been so sick. I got really ill on Sunday evening through Monday. I ended up getting a COVID test and a strep test. I was so sick, and both came back negative, thank God. But this virus really took the wind out of me, and I'm maybe 50%, But how are you and Bill doing? It's great to hear your voice. Well, let me introduce you guys. I told you all that I had to get on tonight because my dear friends Bill and Panayota Karamaitis are joining me. They're up from Ecuador. Bill and Patty, I know you're in Texas as well, right?
Yes, we're in Hillsboro, Texas, with the children and the grandkids.
That's wonderful. So you flew up from Ecuador when?
We've been here a week today.
Oh, wonderful. And you were supposed to be up here this weekend at the parish, but we've received, basically a blizzard, and I think you wisely made the choice not to risk trying to fly into Colorado with such a terrible winter event. So how much longer will you be in Texas?
We head back home to Ecuador on the 15th or the 16th of November. 3 more weeks.
Oh, 3 more weeks.
But it didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
Well, in God's providence, it didn't, but, maybe another time. Bill and Patty, why don't you tell everybody where you live and the area of Ecuador that you're in?
We live about 60 minutes or about an hour north of Salinas, which is the west of Ecuador, right in the Pacific Ocean. And there's a little town, little village, the name of it is Manglar Alto. And it's probably about 800 people, I'm guessing, a small town. And there's just small villages everywhere around us.
Bill, you guys moved down there. How many years has it been now?
It'll be 7 years.
It's been 7 years now.
January.
Hard to believe that. I mean, you were members, really founding members of the Parish of St. Spiridon, and as you reached retirement, I know that you moved down to Ecuador, and you've stayed so close to the parish. I mean, we really, call you parishioners. You're parishioners, and thank God through the internet and all of the ways that we can stay in touch with people. You're able to attend liturgy every week and bi-weekly Bible studies and events that occur in the parish. Do you still feel like you're part of the community?
Oh, yeah. I say our church all the time. We say our church all the time.
Yeah. St. Spiridon is our spiritual
always will be, I think, too.
Well, it's amazing because as COVID set in, that became true for many, many others. I mean, I would say we picked up parishioners on the West Coast. We've picked up parishioners in Canada, down south, in the Southeast, New England area. People write to me all the time saying, you're my parish. I haven't been able to go to church for 7-8 months. I'm immune compromised or whatever it might be. And so we've got parishioners now all over the U.S. and even in Central America.
It's wonderful. Yep.
Well, so I wanted you guys to come on because I wanted to highlight something that's just been a joy. I mean, obviously, the release of Toolkit for Spiritual Growth gave me a small opportunity to speak about the 3 disciplines in the Church of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And next week, after this show, we'll be speaking about almsgiving with Alyssa Bieletich. And our own Friends of the Poor, Philoptos chapter, has been incredibly active, but one of the things that started back in March with you guys was a discussion about beginning a food program in Ecuador. Why don't you say a little bit about that?
Well, we started out here in Ecuador on our own. We did what we could when everything started because we knew it was difficult. So we did a few food kits ourselves. We have a very good friend, Alfonso, who's been a wonderful support and drives us wherever we decide to go to help the people. And it was discussed with some friends from the church. And one day during Bible study, Father Evan asked us how things were going for us and what we were up to. And from that, Panayia's Pantry began. We did our first delivery with Panayia's Pantry on May 26th, and we have done 20 weeks of deliveries, 85 kits per week. So we've done a total of 1,700 families that we've fed since then. It's amazing, and we're so grateful for all the support.
Father Evan, without you and your help, all the parishioners in the church, with all the help, everything that we get, we could not done with any of it. And really, the people down there really, really appreciate it. And it's really nice when you hand it back with food and a lot of kids and the parents. Some of the parents tell you the response you get. A lot of it is, I don't know what we want to eat today, and we're talking about going with my family to my mother's house, and it's really sad.
Bill, I've been touched by a number of the stories that you and Patty have shared. I know that since we began the program, people here in the parish of St. Spiridon's, but not only in this parish, but around the country have responded. We put up a link on stspiridon.church on the online giving button, and you can go there and click and donate. And I think it's about $20, $25 per family per week. Is that about right?
Yeah, if we do a kit that lasts for a whole week, it would be 25. Right now we're doing 2 pounds of rice, a pound of flour.
We get what we end up doing is 200-pound bags of rice, 100 pounds of flour, 50 pounds of oatmeal, a pound of chicken, and what else? Lentils, 100 pounds of lentils. We separate that, and they bring that, they deliver that to our house, and we put them in the small bags, and we divide that on 85 bags. So
it feeds a family. It depends on the size of the family. You can feed a family anywhere from 3 days to 5 days, depending on the size of the family.
Yeah, we do ask them how big is the family, and if the family is big, we hand them out 2 bags.
Yeah.
The thing that strikes me is obviously, we began this first delivery in May. Along with that, the parish has responded with opening its doors to the homeless through a program called Family Promise. In addition, it took up all of the missing shifts from the local food bank and community kitchen and provided kits there. It opened up a COVID relief fund and put in over $40,000. And I have to say, as I stand back and look at what, a small community in a, non-Orthodox environment, in a small town, Loveland's not more than 66,000 people, and its reach, as well as sending food relief to Kisumu in Kenya, where Bishop Athanasius, my dear friend, was. It doesn't look like this is going to stop, thank God. Donations continue to come in. I know you guys are still energized by the work you're doing. I would imagine it gets rough, though, doesn't it?
No, we look forward to it every week.
We just love it. That we go to the house, and at the end of the day, in between we cry, we do this, we do that. But at the end of the day, we're really happy with what happened, what we do and all that. And all that thanks again to the church, St. Spiridon, or whoever donates. And again, all that money that we get there, 100% goes to that. Nothing goes anywhere else. People working or doing stuff. It's 100% goes straight to from the food to the people's houses.
Yeah, I mean, I want to emphasize for people, obviously there's so many ways that they can support those in need, and Panagia's Pantry is just one of them. It is under our Philoptos, or Friends of the Poor, which is a national organization within the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, the required organization of every parish, that they have a chapter that is dedicated to serving those who are spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, materially poor. And so our local Philoptos, Danny Steeler, Nancy Constantine, Maria Cheddar, and the entire board oversees this program along with Bill and Patty Karamitis. And the parish, if you make a donation, it's under the parish's finances and oversight, which is every year audited, of course, by a third party. And so, as you brought up, Bill and Patty, 100% of what's coming in is going right out the door to serve these families. And what was that number again, Patty? How many families have received a food kit at this point?
1,700. so far.
Staggering. While you're here in the States, the program still goes on? Is Alfonso and the group still going, or did you guys take a little break?
His car had been in service, so we missed, but it was incredible because one week we were going to go to a little area, and a friend stepped up. He had a motorcycle, so we hooked a trailer to the motorcycle, loaded everything on the trailer, and he went and made a couple of trips to reload, and we walked the whole village and distributed. And then the following week, we thought we were going to go somewhere else, and again, the vehicle still wasn't finished. So someone else who had a pickup truck and has a bakery in a little town close to us volunteered his pickup. So we did that, and then we left. We couldn't get any more done in October, but Alfonso's vehicle is out. So Friday he delivered with his daughter.
Wow.
So now they'll take a little bit of a break, and when we go back, we'll start full bore again.
It's amazing how generosity breeds generosity. Other people step in, right?
Father Evan, so the listeners can get some idea where this the people where this food goes to is people who live like one room, let's say 16 by 16 food room, no cement floor, just a dirt floor, just caña, bamboo, flat bamboo with holes in it. Most of them don't have a roof on their houses. They call them houses, but it's that's where they live, and it's kind of sad. That's what really gets with the way they live, where they at.
It's so true.
Again, they're all happy. They're all happy. They love each other. You can just see the love between them. It's really, really nice.
Well, Bill and Patty, I thank you for taking just a few minutes out of your evening to jump on the phone with me. And people can go to stspiridon.church and they can donate there, and they can also look at some photos. And I know that if you get connected with the Philoptos of St. Spiridon's Facebook page and Instagram feed, you'll see photos as well, which get updated. You can always contact the church if you've got more questions, and we'll continue to do this work as long as God grants us the strength to do it. Bill and Patty, before you head out to Ecuador, you've got my number. Give me a call when we're not on air, and we can catch up a little bit more, okay?
We will do that. And also, I want to thank you and the church and Gabriel, Deacon Gabriel, for the beautiful slideshow he did on YouTube. So anyone wants to look at that, faces of the children that I've taken pictures of, and he put it just beautiful. So I want to thank.
You bet. So, people, if they want to find that, they just go to stspiridon.church and click on media, and you'll see our YouTube, and you can click down to Panagia's Pantry and watch. It's a 3-minute video, and it'll show quite a bit about the program. So, Bill and Patty, God bless you. My love to the family down there. Great to hear from you.
Thank you, Father.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Love to all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, as they drop off, that'll open a lineup. We've been full as we got going tonight. Again, we're listening to Orthodoxy Live here on Ancient Faith Radio. It's October 25th. We're streaming to you live. The number to call is 1-855-237-2346. If you've been getting a busy line as Bill and Patty drop off, you'll have a chance to get in. We're going to go out to a listener by the name of Ryan. Ryan, welcome to the program. Are you there?
Hi, Father. I'm here. How are you?
Welcome, Ryan. Thanks for being so patient. I noticed down on the call board they mentioned that there was a gentleman holding from Australia. Is that right?
That's it. That's me.
So tell me, it's tomorrow, right, in Australia?
Yeah, so it's Monday, and it's 11:30.
11:30 a.m. And you're calling from where in Australia?
I'm near a town called Camden, which is on the outskirts of Sydney.
Okay. So is it like what we would call the suburbs, like a bedroom community to Sydney?
Yeah, suburbs, 3-4 bedroom houses, side by side, out in the suburbs.
And you guys are in spring, headed towards summer?
Correct. Yep, it's very windy today.
I wish we could switch places. I love spring, late spring. I love summer, early fall. And it's turned today. It's, I think, a high of 12 degrees Fahrenheit, so well below 0 degrees Celsius. Wow. And plenty of snow. I mean, maybe 8 inches or snow or so. Now, Colorado, we're fortunate because we'll get sun this week. It'll melt, but we're headed towards, I call the dark days of winter. You know, the sun will set by 4 o'clock and until we get to the end of December. You know, I don't think it ever gets quite that cold in Sydney, right?
Not where I am. I think you might get -2 in winter, and that might be for one night. It doesn't get much colder than that where I am. I couldn't imagine living in a place that gets that cold.
Oh, well, you know, I was born and raised here, and when people tease me about it, I say, well, yeah, but my ancestors came from an island in Greece, so, you know, I have 2,000 years of warm, sunny days, and then my grandfather, who had to leave Greece, he didn't have any way of making a living or feeding himself, and came to the United States, and he settled in Colorado. We always think, Grandpa, why didn't you settle in Malibu or Hawaii? You know, someplace warm and sunny, but he went where there was work, right? So, well, Ryan, welcome to the program. Welcome. Tell me, what's your question?
Okay, so, look, I wasn't born Orthodox. I actually met my Greek wife when I was a lot younger, and I got baptized at the age of 21. So I wasn't brought up with religion, basically. So I'm at a point now, I've got my first son. It's his name day today in Australia, little Dimitri. So
congratulations.
First name day. Thank you. And, you know, I want to work on my faith and keep it growing just so I can be a good example for him. Now, my question, because I think we all need a bit of guidance in our spiritual life, is what are some practical steps to find a spiritual father or mother?
Wonderful. Well, it probably bears some explanation for our listeners, you know, this idea of a spiritual father or mother. Some who listen to this program are not Orthodox and may never have heard of such a thing, although they may be familiar with the idea of a coach or a mentor. And within the spiritual life, such a thing is highly sought after. We see this clearly, and let's just make sure that people understand that this is a biblical concept. We see this certainly in the Old Testament when we have people like Elijah with Elisha. He provided a degree of oversight and guidance. We certainly see this in the New Testament. I'll mention, you know, for example, Paul, who calls Timothy and Titus his spiritual son, right? And they call Paul, the great apostle and saint, their spiritual father. And within the church, this sort of wonderful relationship between a spiritual child and a spiritual father has been maintained through the centuries till today. So I have a spiritual father. Pretty much everyone that I know who wishes to progress and be sober-minded about their faith seeks one out. And it's a special relationship, an important one. So you're mentioning something that's well attested to within Scripture. I didn't go through all the examples we could point out, and certainly well attested to within the life of the church. And again, I didn't even attempt to go through the myriad of examples of such relationships. And you're asking a very common, important, and practical question. How do I find one? Right? What are the steps that I would take, you know? And
who can be one?
Yeah. Oh, that's a second question. And you're clear when you say, look, I want to do this not because I'm required or have to, but I want to grow. I want to grow in my faith. I want to be a good father, a good example for my own son. And so, you know, look, only a fool attempts to do anything well without the aid of another, you know, whether that's mathematics or whether that's replacing the garbage disposal in your house. You know, it's good to have someone with experience. So what I would say to you, Ryan, is begin by considering who is close by, who has some experience in the spiritual life that you can easily speak with. Because you don't have to go far, typically, I would imagine being in Sydney, there are a number of parishes that you could pop into or call and visit with the priest there. It's typically a parish priest for parishioners.
Okay.
And call and just say, Father, do you have a half an hour and you and I could sit down for coffee? I'll take you out and let's have a chat. And just get an opportunity to visit. And, typically speaking, you don't want someone who's been ordained a year or two. It's better to have someone who's spent some time, right? Some experience, they have some wisdom. They've lived a little bit in the church. And visit with them and bring up the question, look, I'm beginning to examine the role of a spiritual father in my life, and I'm starting with a very practical step of just getting to know some of the priests in the area. And I can tell you right away that in those simple 30-minute conversations, you're going to immediately notice whether or not you connect, just like you do when you meet someone new, let's say at a family gathering or at a party or at a barbecue, right? Right away, is there a connection? Or as we say, is there chemistry? Can I converse with this person? If you notice that there is, right, then you may say to them, would it be okay if I were to begin examining whether or not a relationship can be formed in which I become under your guidance as a spiritual child? And, because it's a two-way thing, and you have to be open to them saying, I've got too many spiritual children. I don't. I haven't been given a blessing by my bishop to do this, or I don't feel comfortable, or whatever it might be, right? And we do this, and we feel no animosity or regret or anxiety. We're just open, right? This is what I'd like. If you're not, give them a way out. If this is not something you're comfortable with, no problem. Just tell me, no worries. I'll find someone else.
I can appreciate how busy priests are. So, I was wondering if it has to be a priest.
It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to.
Yep.
It can be a monastic, usually. It's not often a layperson. Okay. We may have spiritual friends and mentors, but typically within the church, we find spiritual fathers or mothers either ordained or monastics. That's typical. Yep. That's not saying that it's the only way, but it's typical. Yep. Okay. It's nice when it's a parish priest because he can administer the sacraments to us, confession, unction. Correct. He'll visit us when we're sick and in the hospital. He can administer the Eucharist. I would also say it's important that we find someone we have easy access to. Because, to have a spiritual father who's on the other coast of Australia, who barely speaks English, why would we do this to ourselves? Because remember this, Ryan, what's needed for the spiritual child is simply humility, love, respect, and trust. Humility, love, respect, and trust. On the other side, what's needed for the spiritual father is the same list. Humility, love, respect, and trust. If those four things are there, then God will guide the relationship.
It'll happen. Or it won't.
It'll happen. Yeah, and look, then what I would say is, okay, if we can start down this road, let's give each other some time to see if this is the right fit. And give yourself some months, and, you can ask practical questions. Father, give me some ideas about fasting, maybe some things to read, help me with my prayer life. And, you go slow. Don't go fast. Go slow, a little bit at a time. As you build in familiarity and knowledge of one another and context, then with, again, love, respect, humility, and trust, things will open and God will grant grace. And you will benefit. No question, you will benefit. I hope this is enough, Ryan, to get you started.
Yeah, look, I have a few priests that I kind of speak with, but never in this capacity. So I definitely have someone in mind who I'm going to reach out to and
Wonderful.
If it could mutually be beneficial for us.
It always is. I can tell you, as a spiritual father, to many, I always benefit, and people need to know this, that, so often the priest or the monastic will say, my spiritual child has taught me so much. There's so many times I wanted to kneel at their feet as they shared their life with such boldness and intimacy, and in such a beautiful connection. It can really be of benefit to all concerned. So God bless you, Ryan. Let us know after a while how it's going. Okay.
You, Father.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And
thanks for
congratulations
calling.
On the new puppy.
Thank you. Yeah, you bet. Bye-bye. Well, we've got a couple of people who've been hanging on. Don't worry, we're going to get to you. And we did close down the lines only because we just knew we couldn't get everybody in tonight. So if you got a busy line, no problem. Next week, there's a 2-hour window. We'll have our first hour of Orthodoxy Live on November 1st. And then it's a second hour has been added to spend some time talking about the book, Toolkit for Spiritual Growth, A Practical Guide to Prayer, Fasting, and Almsgiving. And I want to mention to all of you how important every person who calls in is to me and to this program. So if you didn't get in, please call back next time. We want to hear from you. So let's go out to, I think it's maybe Gia. Is that right? Do I have Gia on the line?
Yes.
Hi, Gia. Welcome to the program.
Hi.
Thanks for holding for so long.
Oh, sure. It's been such an interesting night.
It always is, it seems. I never know what I'm going to encounter, and I'm always glad for what I do encounter. It's always been a joy and a benefit to me. So, Gia, tell us your question and where you're calling from.
I'm calling from Detroit.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm glad you're better. And we've been
I'm getting there.
with the fires and everything.
Oh,
God,
yeah, the fires is much better. My health is, I'm just inching my way up. In fact, I was so sad I had to cancel. I didn't serve the liturgy today. Father Theodore from the metropolis came up to celebrate with the bishop and the deacon for the ordination. And I just drove to the church and was there for about 15 minutes to witness the ordination, then went home. And I told them as I left, we have to cancel liturgy tomorrow. I can't serve the liturgy of St. Demetrius. I'm just too ill. I'm too weak. But by your prayers and others, hopefully my health will recover. I just got a bad virus. I mean, it knocked me out. So thanks for your prayers. Well, what's your question, Gia?
I'm not quite sure how to word this. It's beyond just what is a fool for Christ. Are you familiar with the movie The Island?
I am.
There's if I may, as an example, there's one time he's not facing east as he's doing his cross during a service, and it seemed to provoke. A lot of times he seemed to do stuff like this to provoke another monk, and that seems like it's not nice. But at the same time, it seems like those who are fools for Christ do things like that. And like in readings, when I'm reading about the fathers or the saints, that they're trying to, I think they describe it as hiding their spirituality or keeping it secret or whatever. So I guess I don't understand how you can be rude when we're not supposed to be rude, but yet, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Here's where. Okay. Are you familiar with the Greek word charisma?
Yes.
Okay, so we find this word in the New Testament, and a charisma is a grace, is a gift given by God, right? And there are different charisma. So we speak about the gifts of God in the plural, charismata. So one may be a teacher, one may be a homilist, one may be an unmercenary, another may be a musician or an artist, right? There are many gifts. One of the gifts in the church is this phrase, we call them fools for Christ, these men and women who have great humility and almost teach in a parabolic way. They tend to teach not by words, but usually by actions that can and on their surface be offensive. And what they're usually after in their actions is to destroy the great enemy of our soul's pride, spiritual pride, right? Intellectual pride, right? And so they often do things that provoke or seem provocative, right? But we should understand that such women and men in the church are not of their own accord choosing this life, but it is a charisma, it's a gift, a grace that God gave them, and it's like a holy office, that they execute. And it does involve a great deal of secrecy or hiddenness, because most of the world scorns them or scoffs or ridicules them. But we see such foolishness in Christ, and we find it also in the writings of St. Paul. The cross is foolishness, right? And Christ was mocked, right? He was ridiculed on his way to his life-giving death. This avenue of grace, and through this reversal of human logic, many come to true wisdom. St. Paul says this, in his own writing when he says the cross is foolishness for those who, are being saved, though it's not. It's the wisdom and power of God. So these fools for Christ and these actions, which, as I said, on the surface can seem rather rude, provocative, disturbing, we must understand their origin. They come from God as a gift, as a grace. They're used to destroy pride, and their basis is in the very nature of the good news, which is the way of Christ is foolishness to the world. And these fools point out the foolish way in which we attach ourselves to the things of this life and this world. It's a great question, Gia. I appreciate you asking it. We've never had that question.
Okay, thank you.
I hope I helped.
Now. Yes, thank you.
Well, God bless you, Gia, and thanks for your prayers. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of Orthodoxy Live.
Oh, thanks for having me. Take care.
You bet. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye. So, as I said, we cut off the lines right after the caller from Australia. Before that, because we just knew we were running out of time. And so, once again, I just remind you as callers and listeners, if tonight you weren't able to get in, we had full lines from the start. Just give us a call next week, 1-855-237-2346. And we'll have a second hour on November 1st to go through the second part of the book, Toolkit for Spiritual Growth. If you haven't purchased your copy yet, you can do that at store@ancientfaith.com. Make sure you do that soon. If you don't have it in time for the book discussion, that's okay. I think you'll still benefit. So we're going to go out to our last caller for the night, Deacon George. Deacon George, welcome to the program.
Father bless. How are you doing? I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm doing okay. Like I said, I'm pretty sick. I've had a sore throat, headache, and body aches pretty much all week. They're with me tonight, but as I said, I wanted to be on the air to receive that call from Bill and Patty. It was so important to me.
Thank you.
Deacon George, where do you serve?
I serve at St. George Eastern Orthodox Church in Hesperia, California.
Oh, wonderful. Is it Antiochian?
OCA.
OCA, wonderful. Today we ordained a new deacon, so my parish now has...
To Deacon Gabriel.
Yes,
Gabriel.
He is worthy, indeed. We have Deacon Mark, who serves our parish and has for several years. Deacon Eugene, who's now a year and a half in, as to his diaconate, and now Deacon Gabriel. Deacon Gabriel, I don't know that he'll be a deacon very long. He graduated the seminary in May, and the bishop said to him, don't get settled. We're going to quickly ordain you to the priesthood, and he'll be joining myself as a priest in the parish, so thank God for that. Deacon George, welcome.
Thank you. I've called before, and our church haven't had a priest for the past...
I remember you now.
Unfortunately, yes. So I can't wait in God's time, and hopefully pray to God that we will, and our church will have a priest, God willing, one day.
Amen.
Father, with regard to my question, I know we're running out of time, but first of all, I'd like to make a comment. I hope and pray that this dark cloud over the world, over our country, over our church also will be lifted soon. The world with regard to the pandemic, the country with regard to the civil unrest, and the church with regard to the action again of the ecumenical patriarch with regard to the metropolitan in Boston and New Jersey. I hope and pray. He needs help and he needs prayer.
So need peace,
all we can
for
do
sure.
is hope and pray. Yes, all we can do is hope and pray. Father, I'm been doing some Bible study, and one of my biggest fear is to give an answer that is not consistent with the Orthodox teaching. I was asked a question, and that question has probably been asked in different ways and different formats. Why do bad things happen? We were talking about the birth of Christ and consequently the events that happened after his birth, and the killing, the slaughter of all the children. Well, why did God allow that? The way I approached it is God will never interfere with with our free will. He will stand by it until the last minute. But can you please expand a little bit on that so the lady that asked me that question can get the right answer from an Orthodox priest?
Deacon George, thank you for calling again, and thank you for your prayer for the world, for the church. The reality is there is darkness, isn't there? I made reference to this in the ordination of Deacon Gabriel at the concluding remarks that I gave to the community. I said, what is the response of the church to darkness? Well, it's loving sacrifice. We step forward into the breach, if you will, into the melee, into the maw of darkness, and we bring our light with us. Sort of like the Pascha Vigil, when all is darkened, the priest comes forward with a light and says to the people, "Come, receive the light from the unwaning light, which is Christ," right? And we know from the beginning of the Gospel of John that while darkness pervades, it cannot comprehend nor overcome. And Herod is a singular figure within the narrative of Christ's birth that stands out much like a predecessor of his, let's say, Pharaoh, who in the environment of God's goodness refuses to accept God's light and turns towards the darkness, as later Pilate will, right? As the Sanhedrin will. And we see constantly, as Judas does, we see constantly this critical moment where someone is given an opportunity to choose the light, and for typical selfish, prideful reasons chooses the darkness and destroys not only themselves, but often many others. I mean, look what Pharaoh did. Look now with Herod. They say over 2,000 innocents were slaughtered that day. Look at later what he does when Herodias's wife dances for him. I'm not his wife, his wife's daughter, right? And he has St. John murdered. How grotesque a murder too, right? And so you're right in pointing out that in each of these instances, someone operates in their own freedom and will and chooses darkness over light, and God does not interfere because in a sense we can say God has circumscribed his will because he has given freedom as a gift to humanity, and this is part of the image of God in us. Now, God does often, though, intervene, and we say, why in this case did he not intervene? This is a difficult discussion, because if we're honest, Deacon George, we have to repeat what the great Paschal communion hymn is, "Let all mortal flesh keep silent." We don't really know, why does God intervene in some situations and not others? Who can know why God does what he does? All we can answer in such situations is say, in the day in which every tear is dried, every sorrow is eliminated, answers will be given to those who have faithfully followed and loved God. And those answers will often Let me put myself on a tangent. I don't know if you've ever read some of C.S. Lewis.
Yes.
But he does something in an intro to a book called The Great Divorce that's very orthodox. He talks about how hell reaches forward and backward in time and space, and heaven does as well. Meaning that when we experience eternal separation, even the pleasure we enjoyed on this earth will be spoiled. So you think, well, let me have my fun. At least I have my fun while I was alive. But hell will obliterate that pleasure we felt. And conversely, heaven will turn every sorrow into joy. So whatever pain those mothers felt, whatever suffering those children had, heaven is something so powerful that it will restore and reverse such pain and such sorrow. This is the teaching of the church. And when we are linear as we are, as when we're condensed by time and space, this seems simply scholastic to us. And yet the Lord hints at one of those events. He says, doesn't a wife or a mother, when her child is born, forget her sorrow?
Yes.
For joy that a child has been born. And I've seen it with my own children. My wife 4 times forgot all of her suffering. This is how such wrongs will be made right in the unwaning day of our Lord Jesus Christ.
So do you think that in the Orthodox Church, with regard to people that keep choosing the wrong and keep choosing the darkness, can we say, for instance, that they're spiritually dead?
Well, there is 2 deaths. There's the death you can die before you die, and this is spiritual death, right? And there's 2 births. You are born in this life and then born anew, right, from above. So the church understands that one can die before they die. And sometimes this is also looked in a positive sense, in the sense that you can die to the world, right?
Yeah.
But spiritual death is a dangerous, horrific, cataclysmic event. So let us all pray we don't ever have it, Thank you, Deacon George.
Thank you, Father. Please keep St. George in community in your prayer, and hopefully by the grace of God, again, we will have a priest ourselves, and axios to Father Deacon Gabriel.
Thank you.
And by the way, congratulations on having your new dog. I'm a dog person myself.
Oh, we love him. We named him Theodore, God's gift. So we call him Theo. Thanks be to God indeed. Okay, bye-bye, Deacon George.
And I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate all the patience of our callers and those who were not able to get in. It was one of those nights where our lines went full right away. So we appreciate you listening tonight. Of course, please dial in next week and join us again. Listen in, tune in, and call in if you didn't get a chance to get to us today. Don't forget, next week we'll have a second hour where we'll be exploring the second part of the book, Toolkit for Spiritual Growth. For Ancient Faith Radio and Orthodoxy Live, it has been my honor and privilege to be your host. I'm Father Evan. Good night to all of you, and God bless.